I will call to order the December 17th meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission. Mr. Forsell, for the last time, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
Indeed, I would. Ready? Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Ms. McGill, will you call the roll, please?
Chair Longstreet.
Here.
Vice Chair Larimore Hall.
Here.
Forsell.
Present.
Connor, Gonzalez, and intern Torres Santos is not here.
Okay, we have one piece of written communication that everyone received regarding the Tai Chi class, and that brings us to public comment. Any member of the public may address the Commission for up to 1 minute on any subject within this jurisdiction of the Commission that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the Commission. So if anyone would like to speak to public comment, we would take it now, and I would like to remind anyone who wants to speak to an agenda item to fill out one of the white forms that are in the back of the room. Seeing no one, we will move to our community service recognition. Ms. Rapp.
Chair Connor and Commissioners, Cameron Benson, who is our Creeks manager, will do the intro to this presentation.
Thank you. Welcome, Cameron.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm Cameron Benson. I'm the City Creeks manager, and I'm here today to recognize and thank staff from Horny Toad, which is a local clothing company here in Santa Barbara, for their volunteer work with the Creeks Division and the Parks and Recreation Department on a number of items. I want to say that I know that Horny Toad staff has been involved with a lot of nonprofits in town and has done a lot of good volunteer work and has partnered with many different organizations to do good work throughout our community. The Horny Toad Santa Barbara office is located right next to Mission Creek, and the staff there have become excellent creek watchers and great stewards of the creek. And I wanted to introduce some members of the Horny Toad staff who we have here today. First, I wanted to introduce Tammy Snow, who is the Communications and Public Relations Director for Horny Toad, Amy Stanfield, who is the Content Manager, and last but not least, Kate Laramendi, who is the Creative Director and also the DTRT Coordinator, which stands for Do the Right Thing Coordinator. And any company that has a Do the Right Thing Coordinator is a special company indeed. Kate initially called because the Toads were interested in volunteering and helping to clean Mission Lagoon. And they followed through on that, and they've been back many, many times. They've taken out hundreds of pounds of trash from Mission Lagoon and the surrounding beach area. Then when Creek Week came around this past October, the Toads asked if they could spearhead a creek restoration project. And so Creeks Division staff worked with them and set up a restoration project on the banks of Mission Creek in Oak Park. And we had almost 24 volunteers come out that day, most of them Horny Toad employees. They spent the better part of the day, planted almost 200 plants and trees on the creek bank. And I was just out there on Monday to take a look at it after the rains came through, and it just looks beautiful. All the plants are alive and well, and really looks nice out there. So with that, I know we have a couple of things to present to them, so I will turn it over to you, Madam Chair, to do that. And I would just like to say, on behalf of the Creeks Division, that it's been a pleasure to work with Horny Toad, and we are very happy to have their service and support in the community. Thanks.
As I think we are all grateful for what you do, because, restoration is replanting, but those plants can go away so quickly if there isn't any ownership in the community. And so the example you set for the rest of the community is so important to all of us. And thank you. And there's 3 of you here today, but this picture shows how many truly were involved in. You should be very proud and accept our thanks for all you've done. So this, and there's a certificate from the department, and we hope you'll continue to do this. And
well, it's just our pleasure. We love being part of this community, and we'll continue to look for ways to stay engaged and have a good time having our business here and having our lives and some fun here. So we look forward to participating in a lot more things.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's always such a nice way to start off a meeting. And now we go to another recognition. Ms. Rapp?
Chair Longstreet and Commission, we actually have 2 commissioners that are going off the commission at the end of this month. One is with us this evening, Commissioner Steve Forsell. Steve has served over 7 years with the Park and Recreation Commission, and I know that Steve originally agreed to be on the commission because the previous Parks and Recreation director twisted his arm and got a commitment, and then he had the gall to retire. But I think it's worked out okay. I mean, Steve agreed to stay, and it's been pretty good. So I do want to recognize Steve for all of his contributions over the years. But most especially for the work that he and Chair Longstreet have done with the Front Country Trails Multi-Jurisdictional Task Force, partly because that's an effort that was a significant amount of effort to take a very contentious issue and draw people into a good public discussion, allowing differences of opinion to be shared and discussed, and bringing 3 different jurisdictions together, the city, the county, and the Forest Service, and to actually move forward and have progress. And his leadership in chairing that task force was a significant contribution to the community. But over the years, Steve Forsell has offered opposing opinions, good opinions, thoughtful discussion. He's been a very terrific commissioner and an advocate for the department, and we really appreciate your service, Steve, and we are sorry to see you go. We do have an appreciation for you that I would like to have Chair Longstreet present to you, if we could. It's a little bit of Parks and Recreation to put in a special place so that you think well of us.
I know that I will miss Steve. Who am I going to fight with? He may just sit in the back and hurl things.
Somebody.
Yeah, I think probably not you, Daniel. I think maybe more Scott is who he's planning on training. He's
I'm going to give him a tutorial.
yeah. I said he's probably more trainable than I am, but it's been wonderful to serve with Steve. He and I sometimes come down on the opposite sides of things, but it's always respectful, and I learn a lot listening to Steve's opinions, and it's been a joy to serve with him. He's been engaged throughout with all the different committees, with golf and with tennis especially, and his leadership on the Front Country Trails. There is going to be a big hole in the work we have going forward because you were a master at that one. And I appreciate it, and I will miss you. So
Well,
thank you.
Thank you.
And
So speaking of training, I have to say that when I first came on the commission, Steve was the chair, and Steve had me come a little early and to show me some of the difficult technological, the technological situation, which up here, because we're such professionals, looks really easy, but actually is really, really difficult. So he talked me through that, talked me through what it is to be on the commission, was very patient and very detailed and very thorough in that training. I've really enjoyed getting to know Steve over the last couple of years. I think he's a really good guy, even though in a lot of big picture stuff we don't see eye to eye. But I wanted to just take the opportunity to actually point out that I've been listening very carefully because I heard from the beginning that Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Forcell never agreed on anything. So I've been actually listening with my trained sociologist's ear as much as possible. And in fact, and at least during my tenure, I've really only seen them actually disagree on any kind of business before the commission, maybe 2 or 3 times. Now, I'm not on the Front Country Trails Task Force. It may be that they're throwing stuff at each other over there. But at least here, the fact is that Steve is very much a consensus seeker, as is Chair Longstreet. And I've seen far more agreement, movement towards an agreement, movement towards a consensus than I have seen any kind of actual disagreement. And that certainly makes it a lot easier to come on an organization like this. So Steve, it's been great to get to know you. I hope I continue to see you around in the community and continue to argue with you about stuff not before the commission, off the people's time. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Well, thank you all for those kind words. I really appreciate it. And believe me, Nancy, if it hadn't been my pleasure to be on, I wouldn't have stayed for 7 years. Yes, Richard did encourage me in the beginning to apply, and I'm grateful that he did. And with all of the commissioners that I've worked with, and we used to have 7 when I started, so it was a much bigger group. There have been an awful lot of different people, and some I've agreed with or disagreed with politically and on some issues, but I can say that there hasn't been one fellow Parks Commissioner in that time that I didn't think was genuine and was really standing up for what they believed in. And I don't think it really ever became acrimonious, and it wasn't really, it was always used out. And I want to thank all of the other commissioners that I've worked with in the last 7 years, because a lot of them are now long gone and kind of forgotten, as I will be soon. And you think back to all of the other people you worked with, and there really were a lot of good people that have been in this position. And so for the new commissioners coming on, my only caution will be, when I say that, Bibi and I disagree and argue on things, we disagree philosophically on a lot of things and on how what the solution should be, but we're actually friends, and we would never say anything personally about each other. And I am going to train Scott to be the counterpoint to your point so that you won't feel lonely.
Keep me on my toes.
Yeah, we will. As to the directors, having Richard Johns and Nancy Rapp and Jill Zachary to work with has been really an incredible pleasure for me, and I couldn't have asked for better administrators, and I, again, would not have stayed as long if I had been working with somebody that I didn't think I could work with. So that's been a pleasure, and I've said in the past, and I'll just say it once more because it merits repetition, and that's I've worked with a lot of different staffs and bureaucracies and groups before, and I do not know of one that I appreciate as much as the Park and Recreation staff. They're not only efficient, responsible, have put the Parks and Recreation above their own interests, but the most impressive thing to me about the staff over the years has been their creativity. There have been so many issues that have come up, and I've looked at them and pondered them and thought, there's no resolution to this. We're just not going to get by this. A month or two will pass, and they'll come up with a thoughtful suggestion and maybe a compromise suggestion or something, and it's very creative, and you can tell a lot of thought went into it. So I really appreciate all the kind words, and I hope to see you all in some other venue.
We're expecting you on the Tennis Advisory Committee.
I will be on the Tennis Advisory Committee.
Okay, well, we will all miss you, and thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you.
And I guess we should say welcome to our new...
Well, Chair Longstreet, I would like to also recognize that Arnaldo Gonzalez, who served on the commission for the last 4 years, is going off at the end of the month, and unfortunately, Arnaldo was not able to be here tonight. We will recognize him. We're going to invite him back to the January meeting so we can officially express our appreciation for his service as well. And yes, I was going to say that yesterday City Council appointed our 2 new commissioners, and they are both with us. And I think that we will all be very pleased by their service with the Commission. I've met and talked with each of them more than once about the work of the Commission and the work of the Department. So Daniel Hockman was appointed. Daniel currently serves on the Creeks Advisory Committee. He is also the president or chair of the YMCA board, has also been deeply involved with Gersh Park over a number of years, and is a local business person. And Scott Burns, who comes to us with a lot of experience in the community, but most recently, and important to the department, served on the city's infrastructure financing task force. Mr. Burns will bring a terrific background and knowledge of the challenges that we face in managing and renovating our many different park and recreation facilities, and he has a family here in town and has support of the parks and also our recreation programs. So they are both here. If you would like to invite them up, you're more than welcome.
Gentlemen, would you like to come up and say a word or two? Or no? Well, come on up, Scott. We welcome both of you to the commission, and really, if there's any issues you want to, questions or anything about what we're doing, please feel free to call. So
let me. You'll find out later, but will start now. I don't talk a lot, and thank you for having me. I will, and I think I will do good work, and I will try to do my very best. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You do talk a lot.
I was just going to mention that. But I won't today. I just want to say that I'm very honored with the appointment and very proud to be joining the Park and Recreation Commission. And it's the first time I get to be on a commission as opposed to an advisory committee. And I'm just looking forward to working with you.
Well,
and
we're
thank you.
looking forward to having both of you, and we will see you in January and ready to hit the ground running.
Commissioners, I thought I would let you know that staff will be meeting with the 2 new commissioners at the first part of the new year to give them an orientation to the department and to the work of the commission. And then I would imagine that we will also be having a commission budget work session around sometime at the end of that month or sometime in that month. So you'll have that opportunity to talk with them as well.
Okay. And the one thing, just maybe to think about, I know Mr. Burns worked a lot on the facilities, but in the past we have done a tour of kind of current projects, and we might, as the weather clears up, want to do that and offer it to council. We have Council Member Francisco that we haven't had any interaction with. So
Great.
okay, thank you. Commissioner assignments reports. Does anyone have anything?
Not since our last meeting.
I attended the West Beach art screening meeting, and that is moving along, and also attended the Creeks Advisory Committee. So both of those are moving. So commission and staff communications.
Okay. Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, I did want to talk about 2 things in particular. We talked briefly about the budget situation for the city, and I did want to let you know that in the last week, the city administrator and the finance director made a presentation to both the City Council Finance Committee and the City Council talking about the current situation of the city budget, both for FY09, our current year, where it's a $5.6 million shortfall, And then the projected shortfall for next year, which is likely to exceed $8 million. As a department, we have been asked to identify almost $600,000 in reductions that we could take mid-year, and we have done that. We feel that most of those reductions they're doable. We will have some minor service reductions. We will, for instance, not be opening Ortega Park Pool in right after the Memorial Day holiday, as we usually do. We'll postpone that until July 1st. Same thing with the West Beach Wading Pool. We'll close the Carrillo Recreation Center 1 hour early. Those were very minor reductions. The majority of the reductions are positions that we're continuing to hold vacant, and other just minor reductions in programs or expenditures. Our bigger challenge is next year, and staff is already brainstorming a number of options. We've had a number given to us that's kind of a range of what that impact might be to the department. Our general fund budget is around $15 million, and we've been asked to be prepared to make a reduction of anywhere from $1 million to $1.6 million, and which is a pretty significant reduction. So we are looking at both opportunities to be entrepreneurial and to increase our revenue, as well as looking at what are the recommendations that we will bring forward for reductions in programs and services. I'm in the process of developing a format, but I believe that there is a need for staff and the commission and our advisory committees to have some discussion about what are the priorities of the community for the Parks and Recreation Department as we're looking at prioritizing our services and making recommendations for reductions. So I've been having some discussions. There are a number of communities that are going through this same process. I get emails every day from, different cities that are looking at all of this too, and a lot of discussion about making sure that we're engaging the community that benefits from our services in identifying the priorities that we want to make sure we're protecting as we go through this process. So I mentioned a workshop in January. You should expect that we will be communicating with the Commission to set something up in January so that we're beginning to have that discussion. It would be a preliminary discussion to the FY10 budget.
Thank you.
And on a positive note, because it's nice to have some positive things, we actually this week will be celebrating the long-awaited opening of the expansion of Bonnet Park. This is the part of the park that is adjacent to San Andreas Street, a major thoroughfare. This is a community that has very limited park space, and we're very excited about this new park development. You've seen a lot of the drawings and pictures, and I hope that you've driven by the area. The opening will be Friday. The ceremony is at 1:30. We're all very excited about this newest addition to the city's park inventory, and will serve a community which is very, very needing of the service and deserving of it as well. So I hope that you'll join us Friday at 1:30. There will be activities for children, and it should be a good time.
Well, I am really heartbroken that I can't go because, as you know, this has been near and dear to my heart since we first even had that idea to buy that piece of property. So I wish everyone well on that day. It looks beautiful. I drove by the other day, and And the one thing I would like to say on the upcoming budget is and you have said this, Ms. Rapp, we're past squeezing and we are now to cutting. This department has squeezed every ounce they can out of every dollar and done a marvelous job. But I think now it's really going to hurt. And, as we look at, we do need to engage the community, but I think we're also sort of past that point where we can stamp our feet and cry and try to make, think that we're going to get more money. And so it's going to be some real tough decisions. And I, for one, do not look forward to it. The staff has done such a good job of making it all work so far to get here. Know that we're behind you as you do this, and we'll be asking the hard questions. But, in past years, we've always really thought, we could just get a little bit more and keep this program alive. And that may not be the case this time around. So we will get to work in January. All righty. We do not have a youth, or do we? I thought I saw somebody that might look like they want to give a youth council report.
Chris McDermott is here representing the Youth Council and will give the report this evening.
Well, welcome back again, Chris.
Hello, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Sorry Diego can't make it, but I am here to give his report. So, the Youth Council was invited and participated in the Milpas, I always say Milpas Day Parade, Milpas Holiday Parade this past Friday. It was really fun. I got to ride along with them in a really big Jeep Wrangler. And we thank those who helped us to accomplish that. One of the Youth Council members resigned, and that is Mandy Longstreth, unfortunately due to a conflicting schedule. But Youth Council wishes her best, and Diego was appointed as the new second vice chair. The Youth Council has rescheduled its Speak Out to Thursday, January 22nd, and the topic will still be on graffiti, art versus vandalism. The Youth Council applied for funding for the Speak Out and graffiti workshops with a newly formed youth group, Youth Making Changes. They're a group of students funded by the Santa Barbara Foundation who will award funds to youth-led projects, one of which would be the Graffiti Speak Out and their following workshops. And by the end of January, we'll know if their presentation to the group was successful, and hopefully they'll get the grant. And the Youth Council did appoint a new Youth Council member, Max Resser from Bishop Garcia Diego High School, and that's in lieu of us losing 2 members, one of which will come back but in June. Youth Council members were invited as honored guests today to the League of Women Voters Luncheon, along with members of the Santa Barbara School District Board and also the entire League of Women Voters. And what happened is all Youth Council members, school board members, and League of Women's Voters members were sitting at tables, and then they all rotated so that they could have discussions, ask questions, answer questions. It was really cool, just facilitating good dialogue, and now it opened up collaboration between all 3 groups. And their next regular meeting will be January 5th, and obviously they encourage all teens to come join them. It's 5:15 in City Council chambers. And again, that's January 5th, and we encourage you to come. Audience, come. And also, happy holidays, and it's great seeing you.
Happy holidays. Are you just about ready to take off?
Yeah, I am, unfortunately. I was actually in January.
Oh, it's fortunately.
Okay, it's both. A little bit of both. In January, I'm going to go to City Council, Parks and Rec, and speak under public comment and say my goodbye. But January 12th, I'm moving into the dorms, and on the 20th, I start classes. So go Bears.
That's at UC Berkeley. So
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Okay.
Before Chris leaves, I would like to express our appreciation on behalf of the department. Chris, it has been wonderful to see your growth coming up through the Youth Council and really learning how the city functions, putting the priority for the youth voice, learning how to bring that voice forward in a very productive way. And you've really been a model for the other youth council members. And it's also been very nice to see you move from being on the youth council to becoming a staff person with teen programs working with the youth council. And you really demonstrate the opportunities that are available for our youth. And so I want to thank you for your leadership with the Youth Council, for the work that you've done over the years with bringing the whole Teen Center proposal forward and being engaged in that process, from meeting with all the committees and the architects and all of that. We couldn't let you leave without saying thank you for all of that, for your hours of service.
Yeah,
Thank
man,
you.
now maybe I'll just have to stay in town and go to CC or UCSB.
No. You need to go. You've earned it. We want you to go.
You can always come back.
Yes, that's right.
But honestly, thank you all so much. It's really been an amazing opportunity, and I'm looking forward to what my experiences I've had here will open up to me, and all the doors that they will open in the future. And I'll definitely look for. I'm definitely looking into the city government in Berkeley just to see how I can get involved, and if they have a youth council up there. So I mean, it started out here, but now the world's at my fingertips. So thank you so much.
There you go.
Chris,
Thank you, Chris.
by the way, do they have a football team up there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I only say that because I watched them a couple times this year. I wasn't sure if they...
We trounced Stanford. They were. Oh my God.
It's already we. He hasn't even matriculated.
We.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
And we trounced UCLA too.
Well, that wasn't hard this year.
Ouch.
Okay, we move to our consent calendar summary of council actions. Are there any comments or?
Chair Longstreet, just very quickly, staff did make a presentation to the City Council on the tree preservation and landscape plan, and Council referred that item to the Ordinance Committee for further study. So we will continue to work with the Ordinance Committee to develop the official policy. And I also wanted to let you know, because I had forwarded you both the Plan Santa Barbara proposed policy guidelines, and mentioned that there were 2 meetings where City Council would be taking input. I did go through all of the Commission notes on the discussion and my speaking points when I represented the Commission at the Planning Commission meeting. And in reading through the this version of the policy guidelines, I felt that all of the concerns raised by the Creeks Advisory Committee and the Park and Recreation Commission were very well represented. So unless I missed something, I felt that the concerns that were raised through the discussion were present in the report and will be considered in the next phase, which is the EIR for the process. So we will continue to be engaged in this process over the next year, the EIR, which is expected to take about 12 months. But I did wanted to get back to you and let you know.
And I was sorry that I couldn't attend those, but it's been kind of a hectic week. Okay, we move on to the approval of minutes.
Move that we waive the reading and accept the minutes as presented for the November 19th, 2008 meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? That passes. And now we move to the Street Tree Advisory Committee. We have a speaker for B1, but the A1 and 2 we do not. So we can go through these rather quickly, I think. Mr. Downey? Do you have any comments on A1 and 2 out of, these are both approvals? Anything untoward with them?
Chair Longstreet, no, nothing untoward. I just wanted to provide some additional input on those. Item A1 is 201 West Montecito Street. It's a red laurel tree. It's fairly rare in the area. The tree is located on the Las Aguejas side of the property. in the more residential side of the property. The building is zoned both commercial and residential, and the proposed project is to add the residential portion of the project. The tree is located in the only location where there is space to provide a driveway and garage entrance. Street Advisory Committee and staff recommend that this be approved on the condition that the applicant attempt to locate a red laurel for replacement, and if not, the replacement tree would then be Little Gem Magnolia.
Okay, well, I am excited if that project cleans up the backside on Montecito, or the Montecito side, because it would be a great addition to the neighborhood. Any questions on 5A1 201 West Montecito Street? A motion?
Move to concur with the recommendation of the advisory committee.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, and then we move on to 414 Talent Road.
414 Talent Road is a red gum eucalyptus, a very large specimen that appears to have been part of a group planting before the street was developed. The tree towers over the garage and home, as well as a neighboring property. Over the years, it's lost several branches, and any attempt at pruning to continue to make this tree safe would reduce the tree to a small fraction of itself currently. Street Advisory Committee and staff recommend that this be approved on the condition we're allowed to plant 2 Brisbane box trees along the property to replace it.
Okay. Questions of staff?
Move for approval of item A2 to concur with staff recommendations.
Second.
All righty. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that brings us to denials. We have a speaker for this one, so we'll have the staff presentation and then the speakers.
We actually have 3 speakers.
3 speakers for this one. 514 Clearview Road. Mr. Danny.
That would be 1514 Clearview Road.
Yeah, 1514.
It's a very large Canary Island pine, probably one of the largest in town. It is approximately 5 feet tall, planted in a 28-inch parkway, which is remarkable in itself. The reasons for removal were that the tree was too large and presented danger from falling cones and or tree parts. The tree is healthy and doesn't appear to be a safety issue at this time. It does drop pine cones, as all pines do. There are no signs to indicate that the tree is likely to break apart. The Street Advisory Committee and staff therefore recommend this removal be denied.
Okay. If the speakers...
So we have 3 speakers, all who marked that they oppose the recommendation, but in fact seems from reading their comments that they support the staff recommendation. First up is Kim Vallely, followed by Sam Robinson. And then after that, Sharon Brazil. So if all 3 of those folks can be ready.
I'm Kim Vallely.
Great.
And I oppose the tree being cutting down. I've lived in Santa Barbara across from that tree for 20 years, and it's just beautiful. And it's a real pleasure to wake up in the morning and see that gorgeous tree. I did Google what the risks are of getting killed by a tree, and it's almost nil. You have actually a higher probability of obviously being killed in a car accident, but also being killed by lightning. So I think it might be a risk worth taking. Also, the other option is the renter did move into a house, with this large tree there, maybe find a house that doesn't have a bunch of trees around it where it can feel more safe.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sam Robinson. I agree with the Tree Advisory Committee to let the tree stand, and it really is a beautiful tree. In fact, I think you can see it in that far corner of your photo there, so I think it'd be a real shame to cut it down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Sharon Brazil, and I live on the street directly across from the tree, and I've been a homeowner there for 30 years. And I also enjoy that tree tremendously. The beauty of the tree in our neighborhood, it certainly enhances the beauty of our street and the west side. The presence and magnificence of the birds that come there, both red-tailed hawks, owl, and even a golden eagle. And this controversy came up several years ago, in which the inhabitants of the house were concerned about the pine cones. What I would say is that it really only presents a pine cone issue for one car in the street parking. And what was determined at that time by the street arborist was that the tree be pruned so that it could reduce the size of the canopy and thereby provide saving the beauty of the tree, but also reducing some of the size of the branches and the pine cones. So I would submit perhaps considering that as a resolution, but certainly preserving the tree for all the beauty that it provides us. Thank you for your consideration.
Those were all of the slips that I got on this item.
Why don't you come on up?
Yeah.
And identify yourself.
For this irregularity. Yes, I filed a petition. My name is Ted Schrode, and the pine cones are not the issue. There's 4 branches on this, which I submitted photographs with the petition, and they're very large branches, and 2 of them, if and when they do fall, will take out the 2 houses that are adjacent to it. And my recommendation was that if it was not removed, that at least those two large trunks, as there's 4 of them, be trimmed back or those 2 trunks removed. It's a very unusual tree. It doesn't have a single trunk. If it did, I wouldn't have any objection to it. It's just they're leaning over towards the 2 adjacent houses, and that as a result, when the wind gusts were hitting this week, I was out of there. So I have lots of respect for the wildlife, and the pine cones. They've come close to hitting a number of people and taking out one windshield, but it's really the tree trunks that are the main problems on that one side particularly. And I have 8 signatures from other neighbors that are in the area. It's all I could gather in 2 days. So
Okay.
if
Thank
you want those submitted.
You can submit those to staff if you'd like. Okay. With that, we will close the public comment, and it is back to the commission. I think I remember when we saw this tree several years ago, and I believe one of the issues was pine needles at that point, because I remember going and looking at it in the 1500 block of Clearview. So it's an important tree in the neighborhood as far as I can see. I would take the Street Tree Advisory Committee's recommendation on safety, and I know that that's one of the areas that they do look at. So did you have any comments on that, Mr. Danley?
As I stated earlier, the tree was inspected for any visual safety hazards. There was none observed. I would comment that removal of those 2 trunks would predispose the main trunk to decay and really would be a poorer option than a normal trimming of the tree.
Thank you. Okay, what is the commission's pleasure?
I'd move to concur with staff recommendations regarding item B1.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So we've denied that removal. Any vote of the commission is appealable within 10 days to the city council. So just so you know. We go to B2, 457 Paseo del Descanso.
457 Paseo del Descanso is a black acacia tree. The reasons were stated that there's some history with trees of this species in that area that have fallen over, and they're concerned that this tree would fall over and hit their home. The tree was inspected. It was determined there's no visible signs of any safety issues regarding the stability of the tree. Street Tree Advisory Committee and staff therefore recommend that this be denied.
Okay.
Move to concur with the recommendations of staff and the advisory committee.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
That brings us to item C1, 404 East Padre Street.
Chair Long Street. I did it again.
I'm just going to change my
sorry.
name. It'll be easier. Don't worry.
The tree at 404 East Padre is a large coast redwood tree. The reasons stated were for the security of an adjacent retaining wall and the students that pass by it from an adjacent school. The wall is cracked and leaning towards the public sidewalk. The tree trunk is less than 2 feet from the wall. The tree has been side trimmed by the utility company for the high voltage wires. The garden space there is very small for the tree. Any root pruning to correct the wall would destabilize the tree. If the tree were to remain, it's predicted that the wall will fall into the public right-of-way. The Street Tree Advisory Committee and staff determined that the tree is much too large for the space that it's in and recommend approval.
Okay.
I move to accept and concur with the recommendations of the advisory committee and staff.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, and now we have 3059 Lucinda Lane, C2.
Chair Longstreet. The 3059 Lucinda Lane is a large California sycamore planted very close to the corner of the garage at the edge of the driveway and a walkway that goes around the side of the home. The reasons stated were that it was destroying the foundation and the driveway. There are visible cracks to the stucco at the corner of the garage, which may be caused by this tree. There's definite lifting of hardscapes around the tree. The Street Advisory Committee and staff determined that this tree is much too large for the space and recommend it be approved.
Okay.
Move to concur with staff recommendations regarding C2.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. 1732 Santa Barbara Street.
Chair Longstreet, 1732 Santa Barbara Street is a rather large property that has several trees that have already been removed from the property. These trees are being proposed to be removed because they all pose a danger to infrastructure. One, the Tipuanas are within a foot of the retaining wall at the front of the property, already causing damage to those and merely a quarter of their eventual size. The podocarpus tree is on the side of the home. It is less than a foot away from the foundation of the home. There is no evidence that it is causing any damage yet, but it's anticipated that it will. Due to the nature of these trees and their location, the Street Tree Advisory Committee staff recommend that these be approved on the condition the applicant show approved landscape plans reflecting adequate replacement trees farther away from these structures.
Okay, I think that seems reasonable.
Move for approval of item C3. Concur with staff recommendations.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. That brings us to 1224 Diana Lane.
Chair Longstreet, 1224 Diana Lane is a Tipuana tree as well. It the home was purchased a few years ago by a new owner, and in anticipation that they would apply for the removal of this tree, they planted several other trees on the property. They felt now was the time to apply for the removal of this tree based on the size it is now and the potential for size of the tree, and the effects of the roots on other understory plants. When the Street Advisory Committee visited the space, they determined that the space is quite small for a tree of that size. There's adequate plantings besides this tree on the property to shade things. It was noted that there are 3 major roots that are circling roots that, if the tree's allowed to grow, will cause this tree to become unstable. It's not unstable at this point. But based on those findings, Street Advisory Committee and staff recommend that this tree be approved.
Okay.
Move to concur with staff recommendations on item C4.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay.
A
And
lot of trees this
I know.
month, Madam Chair.
I know we do. 3509 Madrona. Now, this one, we have already discussed this. We've got the planting plan now, though, right?
Chair Longstreet, in February of this year, this was reviewed. This commission asked the applicant to come back with a landscape plan before they would approve the removal of the tree. Not quite understanding what they needed to do, they went ahead and developed their own idea of what they should plant and proceeded with planting that landscape. The tree has not been removed. However, in considering this request, we've determined, the Street Advisory Committee and staff determined that their plant palette and replacement trees are adequate, and we should move forward with approval on this.
Okay.
Do you want to just clarify and sort of repeat for people who are watching at home what the difference between presenting a plan and following and just going ahead and planting is? I mean, it seems like it sounds like what you're saying was an honest mistake. So,
Chair Longstreet, Commissioner Lerma Hall, the applicants simply installed the landscape that they wanted to install. The request of this commission was for them to bring back a landscape plan, typically developed by a landscape architect. However, it could be developed by an individual person. A landscape plan would show the planned installation of plants and their locations within the property. Given the faith of this person in trying to do the right thing, although they misunderstood, we felt it was important to move this forward.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you. So we need a motion on this one. I don't think we voted on it.
Move to concur with the recommendation.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Downey. Have a happy holiday. And that brings us to our administrative and staff reports. Item 6 is the Symposium on Aging and Senior Expo for information.
Jason Bryan, who is our active adults recreation supervisor and has long been the person in our department most responsible for the recreational needs of our senior and aging population, is here to give this report. And he's going to talk about 2 different things. One is a report to you on a symposium on aging that involved a number of agencies within the county talking about issues of our aging population, and then also about the Senior Expo, which is an annual event. Jason?
Yes. While I load up here, Madam Chair, Commissioners, it's my pleasure to present on 2 major senior events which took place fairly recently in the aging community. The first one, as Nancy indicated, is the Aging Symposium. This was the first event of its kind held, come on, here we go, held in September at the Fest Parker Resort. BB, I believe you were among the participants and stakeholders there, so you know firsthand. I was hoping to show you a great video that was presented or produced for this event, but we're having some technical issues, so perhaps a future commission meeting we will have that ready for you.
I would also think that might be something we want Channel 18 to show at some point.
Oh yeah, it is a great video. It really is. This event had leadership, Salud Carbajal, Nema Schwartz, the Gildea Foundation, and AARP were some of the leads, but there were a lot of agencies that came together to get this event off the ground. It was a lot of work, but it was a great event. Over 150 what they call stakeholders. They ran out of space, so they kind of had to limit to only a few representatives from every agency because there are so many agencies in this community that are serving the senior population. The goals of the event were, as I'll read off here, to raise awareness in the community at large of the needs of our aging population, to broaden the participants' knowledge of the needs of seniors in our community, to foster collaboration. And that was kind of a key part of it is the collaborative approach to solving problems in our aging population. They also sought to bring together the philanthropic community and the nonprofits and service providers to try to figure out how to best approach some of these problems, to identify the gaps in senior services and funding sources, and make recommendations for prioritizing the needs and moving from this one event to something that's actually going to be actionable, because they were looking at similar events that had huge documents that were created afterwards, and then they were just kind of neatly filed away and never acted upon. So they wanted to make sure that this was brief enough on the final recommendations that this can be actionable. And I believe the white paper were part of your commission packets that went into a lot more detail than we're going to go into today. Looking at just the demographics here, California has the largest adult population in the country, and Santa Barbara County has proportionately a larger percentage of seniors than the state, and most of those in Santa Barbara County reside in Santa Barbara city limits. So certainly what is impacting the aging community is going to impact the city of Santa Barbara. Probably not a huge surprise, though. The group, after some keynotes and some group sessions, were broken into individual rooms where they were talking about specific topics. You'll see those topics here: health, housing, transportation, assisted living, elder abuse, mental health, and services for homeless seniors. Because we don't really have a recreation track here, I attended the health work group because community wellness and health go hand in hand, and I think that's where we fit best within the options that were available to us. All of the breakout groups were given some guidelines to approach it with themes. So safety, culture distinctions, economic realities, and dignity and self-sufficiency were some of the themes that all of the groups looked at on their approaches. And they came out with recommendations from all of the groups. A lot of it is really looking at things with fresh eyes, and what was presented in the keynote speech, and we talked about it actually other events, is there are so many nonprofits in the agency and so many people trying to do the right thing, but not everyone can do everything. So part of it is looking at, okay, who does it the best, who has the best long-term approach, how can we bring different groups together to be as effective as possible, and measurement for the funders is going to look at, okay, instead of perhaps meals served or something that's really easy to count, how are you really impacting people's lives and improving the health of the senior population? So there are going to be some differences in the way that money is handed out, we believe, and in the collaboration that you're really going to need to bring the right players together to fit these, to fulfill the needs of the community. Going on to the next major event, this was in November 6th, was the Senior Expo. I presented on this last year. This is the 20th annual, so each year we try to do a little bit better. We had 14 lead agencies, 90 exhibitors, and nearly 1,300 in attendance. We had some growing pains here. We had nearly 200 seniors that we didn't see last year as far as numbers go. We believe that the economy has contributed to the rise in the numbers that we're looking at here, because this was a way of getting a flu shot and lunch and all this stuff for $5. So we saw considerably longer lines than we've ever seen before. We're looking at we've never run out of flu shots before. We've always had 600 shots. We've had some little scares. We didn't know there were extra forms over here, but we've never ever run out of shots. This year we did. We had a commitment of 600 shots from Sansum. Over 750 were provided, so they had a little kitty that they dipped into to give more than we had allotted for or counted on. But we still ran out of shots after 750 shots. So a lot of people did get served, but there were some that didn't at this event. It was held like it was last year in the Warren, not Warren Hall, but the big exhibit hall at Aurora Warren Showgrounds. Very similar layout than what we did last year. On the left-hand side were the flu shot areas. The right-hand side is the lunch area, and we did fitness testing on the back wall. So the system seems to work. We just need to make some improvements. One thing we saw a lot more of this year was the line. Last year we had a group of nurses from Santa Barbara City College, and they have a program that cycles every 2 years. So we had a huge army of people working the line last year to work on flu shots forms. This year we didn't have that. So the line was very considerable. But the people did get through. As last year, we had a Dixieland Jazz Band to try to give them something creative to do or something fun to listen to, at least while they were in line, and it did help with people as they were waiting to get processed through. The flu shots, as I said earlier, were provided by Sansum. What we're doing is every year Sansum, or every other year it's going to be Sansum, every other year it's going to be Cottage. In past they shared responsibility and had 2 different lots, but it was a little inefficient and confusing that way by having 2 separate stations. So Sansum stepped up, and we're looking forward to working with Cottage for next year. Here is AARP, one of our partners, helping some seniors at their table. AARP was one of the sponsors this year. Here are a couple representatives from the Hard of Hearing Support Group. This is a group that meets at the Louise Lowry Davis Center. This was another of the 90 tables that we had disseminating information. It is a very affordable way of reaching the community for these agencies. Nonprofits, I believe, was at 75. Private businesses was 150. And there were a whole lot of people that you can reach. And, of course, games and giveaways and fun stuff at your table is a way of having people come up and approach you and start up dialogue. So there were a lot of interesting things to do for the seniors that had already gotten their flu shot and were working through the lines. And again, the same as the last few years, we conduct a fitness test where seniors are given a series of very simple tests, and we give them a nice report that they can take to their doctor, and it'll give them their age and say, okay, on upper body flexibility, you may be 65 years old, but your flexibility level is that of a 72-year-old. So the doctor can review that and maybe have some specific recommendations how to improve their health. And first time this year, we had We Fit at the event, and that was kind of fun for the seniors to use some new technologies. So a lot of them were using this for the first time and seeing, hey, this is something that I can do right in my house, and there are newer technologies that are available to me. And we hope to attract new technologies and new vendors each year to give it a little bit of a fresh appeal of, okay, I'm going to get something new and learn something new at the next year's event. The lunch program, we tried to make some improvements upon it from last year. We got some complaints from dietitians that we did only white bread last year, so we tried to improve upon that, and it seems to be working okay. But again, every year we try to make some steps forward. and it seemed to work okay this year, except the numbers did surprise us a little bit, and some people were getting a little frustrated in those lines. Now, outside of the Senior Expo, along the theme of collaboration, there are several other agencies that I work with. One is an AARP Community Presence Team. This is a monthly group that meets over at the Goleta Valley Senior Center, and we review outreach opportunities. We work on events, we collaborate. It's a great group of people to work with. And I'm looking forward to continuing to collaborate with them on programs like Car Fit and other senior activities. Also, who's presented here before, Retired Senior Volunteer Program. I'm now on the board for RSVP. They've worked very closely with us in helping us with our volunteer programs, recognizing volunteers, placing volunteers, and I will continue to work with them. I think that's an important agency for us to connect with. Another one that was represented at both the Senior Expo and the Aging Symposium is United Way. Right now they're going through their Power Partnership Initiative, and I'm on the Seniors and Family Steering Committee. And again, it's this whole theme about collaboration and how nonprofits are working in this community, and really some things that are going to have to change in the future because we're having record growth in the number of nonprofits, but the funding really isn't keeping pace with that. So something's got to give. And not that nonprofits aren't doing a fabulous job, but everyone can't do everything. And that concludes my presentation on the Senior Expo and the Aging Symposium.
Thank you, Jason. Any comments? I think we're going to see more services required in this current economic times. We're going to see more seniors in need, a lot more, and we have some major gaps in services. So it'll be interesting, and we have some major gaps in funding. So it's going to be challenging, I think, the next 5-year period.
And it's just starting to hit that age wave from the boomers. So we're seeing, the seniors who don't want to be called seniors. But we will get it. I think, the next 10 years are going to be very challenging.
I don't know. I have no idea. I forget. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
And for all that good work. Okay, and that brings us to the Best of Awards for Teen Center.
Commissioner Longstreet, we're very proud to bring this report to you today, and Cyrus Alexander, who is the coordinator of the Teen Center working with teen programs, is here to give the report.
Great. Welcome, Cyrus.
Yes. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. So last month, the Teen Center was awarded the Best of Teen Program by the Southern California Teen Coalition. That coalition's made up of nonprofit teen agencies with over 500 members and representing 160 agencies in Southern California. And basically, it was really nice. We went down to Baldwin Park. The drive was really long, but we made it. And it's really nice to be recognized by other members in your field, and they know how much work and effort goes into providing programming for teens. And we were recognized for the second year in a row with the Teenie Award for the best teen program / teen center. So it was really nice to be out there and receive that award from them. And they also, recognize us for our youth council being involved in the teen center, along with city council and teen programs. Just coming together and getting the teen center, built and up and running and everything. So that was really nice. I was there with Chris McDermott and Susan Young to receive the award.
Well, congratulations on the award and all the hard work that went into it. So.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes,
and if you're wondering what a Teenie Award is, it's a little
tiny thing?
actual size foosball player that's on a little podium. So, yeah.
Foosball player, okay. Yeah. Now, do we have foosball at the Teen Center? Okay. All right. And now we are to old business. Recommendations for regulating commercial activities in city parks and beaches for action.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, this item is back before you. It was brought to you at your September meeting where you had a lengthy, many comments from during public comment on this issue, and staff presented a thorough report. You asked us to come back to you with some additional information and recommendations. We're here tonight to do that. You also have a number of people here that are interested in the item, so I just want to remind people to make sure that you've filled out a speaker slip if you want to comment. And Susan Jang Bardick will give the report. Susan?
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Longstreet and Commissioners. I'm Susan Jang Bardick, Facilities and Special Events Supervisor. As Nancy was saying, at the September 24th meeting, you heard from staff and park users about the influx of boot camp exercise programs in certain parks, the challenges related to regulation, permit fees, user impacts, and competition among these businesses. And we presented 3 policy options to regulate these activities. Tonight, we'll present staff recommendations for appropriate park locations for commercial activities, identify specific park locations for those activities, talk about our new permit requirements and fees we'll establish for these commercial activities, and recommend a lottery system that will be created to provide equal access for favored locations. In developing policy recommendations, it became clear to us that we first needed to identify what commercial activities are. So our definition for commercial activities are activities that are recreational in nature, consistent with the mission of Parks and Recreation. The activity consists of multi-session classes offered by a vendor which is not otherwise affiliated through Parks and Recreation Department. To be clear, vendors are business enterprises who may or may not charge a fee for these classes. Uh-oh. Let's see, little technical difficulty. Okay, well, I'm going to have to fill in the blanks here. On this slide, the commissioners had requested more information on the zoning of parks and whether commercial activities were appropriate for particular parks, such as Shoreline Park. The city's municipal code designates 9 specific park categories. That's what's missing on the slide. Basically, these 9 categories are undeveloped parkland, open space, passive parks, which are basically, in these 3 categories, there are restrictions on organized recreational activities. The next categories are neighborhood parks, community parks, beaches, beach zones, sports facilities. These 4 facilities do allow organized recreational activities. The other 2 categories that are missing from the slide are community buildings and regional parks. We're not going to be discussing those today. Just to give you some examples, Honda Valley is considered undeveloped parkland. Douglas Family Preserve and Palmer Park are open space zones. And Alice Keck Park Memorial Garden and Andrew Clark Bird Refuge are passive parks. And as I was saying, in these 3 categories, undeveloped, open space, and passive parks, organized recreational activities are restricted. Bonnet Park, Eastside Park, La Mesa Park, these are considered neighborhood parks. Alameda Park, Oak Park, Shoreline Park are categorized as community parks. Ledbetter Beach, East Beach, and West Beach are beach zones, and Dwight Murphy Field is a sports facility. According to the Park and Recreation Zone, these categories have no restrictions for organized recreational activities. Oh, okay, there it is. I didn't realize that there was some pizzazz to this slide, so here's the rest of the information. Okay, next slide. Oh,
Technology is a wonderful
More
thing,
flying
isn't it?
in stuff. Okay. So I'm going to click again, and let's get the information up here. So this slide basically is further defining the differences between a neighborhood park community park, a beach zone, and sports facilities. So, some of the differences are a neighborhood park is generally smaller than a community park and smaller than a beach or a sports facility and may serve a limited geographical population. But neighborhood parks do have playgrounds. They have picnic and small group areas. And in these types of parks, we do allow picnic and small group use and occasional special events. In community parks and beach zones, they serve a wider geographic population and allow for many forms of recreation, both passive and active activities. Sports facilities, of course, are intense active recreational facilities, and they may hold ball games and tournaments there. Staff recommends that commercial activities be generally permitted in these four category zones. Our approach for the commercial activities policy will be pretty similar to how we permit other park uses. Staff will determine the most appropriate staff will determine the most appropriate neighborhood or community park, beach or sports facility to hold the activity after we talk with business owners and understand the type of activity they're proposing to have. We're going to ask them about the noise level, the number of participants they may have in their class, whether the activity moves around or stays stationary within the area, if they are going to be bringing in equipment, and if there are going to be similar activities taking place, on the same day or in the same week in that particular location. We're also going to look at other concurrent park uses, neighborhood impacts, etc. Like I said, just like what we do with other park uses. Here's a chart of what staff deems as most appropriate for commercial activities. These are non-waterfront park locations. Alameda Park, both the west side and the east side. The west side is where the gazebo is. The east side is where Kids World is. We're also proposing Dwight Murphy Field. There's an exercise and circuit training area there. We're also including La Mesa Park as a non-waterfront location, McKenzie Park, and Oak Park. Also note that on the right-hand side, we've indicated the group size that we think is most appropriate for these specific areas in these parks. In the commissioner packets, you have aerial maps of all the non-waterfront locations we propose for commercial activities. But for those in attendance at today's meeting and watching this on television, here's a sample aerial map of two non-waterfront locations, Alameda Park West and Alameda Park East. In choosing these non-waterfront locations, we did focus on parks that could withstand a greater influx of activities and that might not be adjacent to residential areas so that we wouldn't have noise complaint problems. This particular side is what staff deems as most appropriate. These are most appropriate waterfront locations for commercial activities. Chase Palm Park is included on this, East Beach, Ledbetter, Plaza Del Mar, Shoreline Park, and West Beach. We will consider other locations on a case-by-case basis, and staff does have the option of limiting the 20 or more participant numbers once we talk to business owners and we look at the various factors that they are going to have, noise, that sort of thing, as we talked about before. Here is one aerial map of a waterfront location that we think is appropriate for commercial activities. This is Chase Palm Park's soccer field. At this location, it's a very popular drop-in soccer practice spot in the afternoon. So, of course, this location will only be available during morning hours. We thought we'd include a slide of Shoreline Park since this is the most favored location for business owners, but where the department has received the most complaints. We proposed 2 different areas in the park that are on opposite ends of the park. What we initially planned to do is consider not having concurrent fitness group use, but as the policy continues and we've placed various businesses in various parks, we may consider adding in, a second site and have them run concurrently. We just want to see how this affects park users in the neighborhood. Staff is recommending that we increase our permit fees. Currently, the current fee is $15 per hour for city residents or $18 an hour for non-residents. What we're proposing is for the non-waterfront locations, the fee will increase to $20 per hour for city residents or $24 for non-residents. For the waterfront locations, again, this is Chase Palm Park, West Beach, Shoreline, Ledbetter, we propose $25 per hour for city residents or $30 an hour for non-residents. In the prior research that we presented at the September meeting, we have found that the non-waterfront location fees are slightly lower than what other cities are charging, but the waterfront locations are right in line with what they charge. At the September Commission meeting, we presented 3 policy options, and subsequently we also had 2 meetings with business owners, and we had about 4 businesses attending those meetings. There was no support for option 2, which is the independent contractor status option, or option 3, the vendor licenses option. So therefore, staff moved forward with option 1, the comprehensive commercial activities policy with new conditions and a lottery system. I just want you to note that the independent contractor status can always be available if any vendor happens to be interested in that option. More special effects. Okay, this slide, we are proposing new conditions of use required for all commercial businesses. The first condition will be that the permittee must have a current city business license. This is actually a requirement that is already in effect. The second new condition is that the permittee must provide the city with $1 million general liability insurance in the form of a certificate listing the city of Santa Barbara, its officers, employees, and agents as additional insured. This is not a new condition. The third condition is that the permittee will not be allowed to have amplified music or sound. I don't think this is going to be an issue for most of the fitness businesses because they don't have amplified music or sound currently. Fourth condition is that we want the permittee to display the permit during the activity so that it's visible to anyone who happens to pass by. The fifth new condition will be we will not allow large equipment to be brought into a park or beach. Large equipment like gym equipment that you would find at a gym. We may also impose additional conditions if we have to address courtesies to other park users, if there's use of public pathways in a park, if there's a good deal of activity, movement around a park, etc. All of these things in order to lessen impacts to other users. For our proposed new commercial activities policy, of course, we want to have a lottery system in place for the favored locations in order to provide equal access for everyone. Yet at these 2 meetings that we had with commercial businesses, everyone, of course, wants a system that is easy to manage for staff and, of course, gives business owners adequate time to plan and promote their classes. Sort of in a nutshell, the rest of this is how we envision this lottery system working is that applicants would submit their request by a particular date. They would list their first, second, and third location choices, including the days and the hours. Staff would then randomly draw applications and place them into our reservation system as they are available, and we would issue permits for a 6-month period of time. At the September Commission meeting, the topic of grandfathering certain activities based on past use came up. Staff advises against this since some of the long-standing programs have not been permitted in the past, so determining criteria for grandfathering would be difficult in light of this. Also, the issue of discrimination on the basis of gender was brought up during public comment and subsequent written communication. Is the city required to provide equal access to various park locations based on whether the activity is co-ed or serves primarily one gender? Staff consulted with the city attorney, who indicated that the UNRU Act, which is part of the California Civil Code, and you see this on your slide, will apply to all commercial activities requiring or receiving a permit to use a city park. Just to be clear, this does not mean that the UNRU Act requires the city to provide equal access to certain park locations based on who is served through the program, as long as the process we use to award the permits is fair and equitable to all. But what it does mean is that any business operating in a city park cannot exclude one specific gender from their activity. Summarizing my presentation, staff recommends that the Commission approve our new comprehensive commercial activities policy that we presented here, with new conditions of use, a lottery system that allows for equal access for the favored locations, and an increase in fees that we proposed. That's the end of my presentation. I am open for questions or comments.
Okay, do you have any questions before we go to public comment?
Yeah, I had several questions. I went to, as I said I would after the last September meeting, I went to observe one of the boot camps, and I went to Booty Camp Santa Barbara, and it was at Alameda Park. And it was very well run, and there were 6 to 8 women. And at the same time, there was a impromptu volleyball game going on. There was Kids World. There was a lot of other things. It was not at all disruptive to the park. It fit right in. It was a very good location. And I understand in talking to them that they are very happy at that location at Alameda Park, which is a very positive thing. My question related to that is when we are setting up the fees, and we've got Alameda Park, and we have group size 20-plus participants. There were 6 or 8 in this group when I was there. Is the fee going to be the same if there's 20 participants or 6? Because I can, I'm okay with $1 a person if you've got 20 people in there in the class. If you've got 6 people and they're paying $3 something a person to get to the $20, may have a little difficulty with that, since my primary goal here is to preserve small businesses and see that these people don't go out of business. I think they're performing a real function in encouraging exercise, and none of these people are getting rich doing this. I can see that. So why do some of the categories indicate 20 plus, and then some indicate, like La Mesa, 1 to 20? I know La Mesa is a small park, but is there any differential in the fees that are charged if 6 people show up or 30 people?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Forcell, the group size is more an indication of the maximum allowable in that location, and that's really the purpose of the group size. The fee is more based on, again, it's a private business using city property for their gain, and the use of city property requires the payment of the fee. So the fee is separate from the number of people in the activity. Most of these activities are going to be of the size that you saw, smaller activities. If we were to have an influx of businesses that had greater numbers of people and there was more impact to the park, then we might look at a different fee structure. But at this point, most of those businesses are in that size.
Okay. So, for instance, La Mesa Park then can have no more than 20 participants, 1 to 20.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to ask one more question and let then hear the comments, and I have several others. But, you know, one thing that was mentioned in September, and I don't see addressed here anywhere by some residents near Shoreline Park that seemed a valid concern, was that some of these activities started at 6 in the morning, and that was distressful to them. I don't see anything in here about time constraints or time limitations.
Chair Longstreet, Commissioner Forcell, we decided to leave it at staff determination as to, you know, once we talk to people. Some of these activities are very quiet in the morning. They realize that it is 6 in the morning, and, you know, maybe aside from some car doors slamming, you will not hear their activity because they're just walking through the park. The instructor probably will not be using a loud voice to provide instruction, and some of these locations are not near residential homes. So we decided, rather than having a policy that might be so rigid and therefore exclude some potential uses that would not impact the neighborhood, we decided to leave that at staff's discretion.
Okay. Madam Chair, I think I'll just go ahead and finish my comments since I'm fairly well into them now. I think it's a very good idea, the lottery system that you've come up with, and that solves a lot of problems, and it's very encouraging to see that when the groups met with you that they had apparently some consensus as to, and that several of the groups are amenable to meeting in other places other than Shoreline, relieving some of the problems there. And this may be something for the future, but the idea of calling this, appropriate park locations for commercial activities, sometimes when I read this, it sounds like we're setting up a retail outlet in the park or something. So a few suggestions that it might be used as clubs or pay-to-use or groups or, I don't know, organizations or something, some other word to get that commercial out of the whole picture, because it doesn't, I don't perceive this as a commercial activity when 6 or 8 women are getting together to do aerobics for an hour in a park. And the other thing is, again, under the rubric of not creating too much in the way of expenses, I understand having a city permit, which is $100 a year. I get one. Everyone that's in the commercial business gets one. That's fine. Having the permittee provide the city with $1 million insurance liability, I'd be curious to know what that costs and stuff. The idea, if we're going to increase fees, for example, we're increasing fees 66% at Shoreline Park. We're going from $15 to $25. That's an enormous increase. And then if we're going to also add on this insurance liability policy, I just want to see that the big picture is not that it's going to overwhelm these people so that they are going out of business and everything we've tried to accomplish has not been accomplished.
Do you want staff to respond to that? Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Well, first off, I would remind you that this fee was not set with this type of activity in mind. So the fee that exists was, not taking into consideration this type of activity. The need for insurance is required by city risk management. It's required for groups that hold public events, whether it's a triathlon or fiesta or anything else that's a public event taking place in a city park. So the requirement for insurance, most of these organizations should have their insurance anyway and operate in that way. Alternatives, of course, are they can become an independent contractor with the city, and then that's a different contractual relationship with the city, but that's not something that they choose. So it's really a cost of doing business. It's a reasonable cost. It's not really a negotiable cost from the city's perspective.
Yeah, I understand.
I'd like to get to public comment before we go into
one more, and then that'll be the last comment I have on this. I understand you, Ms. Rapp, and I'm in agreement in general with you on all of this. I just have a hard time comparing a triathlon with these women exercising in the park. A big event is easy for me to understand when the costs are spread around and all that. I just, in this small group setting like this, it just seems a different animal to me.
I'll just give you an example of a situation that we had in one of the classes that was offered through the Parks and Recreation Department. And it was a dog obedience class, which you would think would be relatively minor. And someone who was arriving for the class tripped and fell as they entered the park. And so that's an example of something that could happen that would end up with the city being involved potentially in some kind of a lawsuit. So I understand the perspective, but I think we have to look at the broader picture.
Okay, thanks.
I think we're going to move to public comment now.
We have Robert Grijalva, and sorry if I got your name wrong, followed by Karen Monson.
Ms. Rapp, could you turn the lights on?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're the first person. Good afternoon, council members. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Robert Grijalva, and I'm the owner of Body Boot Camp of Santa Barbara, and this is my third time in front of you. And I'm here to address the proposal that you'll be considering around commercial activities in our public parks. When this issue was first brought to your attention, it was stated by the Parks Department that they had received a few complaints about our parks turning into a gym. And the goal of the department was to find a way to regulate these activities. I strongly feel that the proposal presented today doesn't do anything to address that concern, but rather will exacerbate it. I think that most of the proposal is really good, specifically opening up new places for these kinds of camps to meet. But for the businesses, the proposal will, the increased fees that is being proposed will have several negative effects for both the businesses and the neighborhoods. For the businesses, these fees will make it very difficult for us to remain open. It just will. I've attached to these remarks, which I'll leave with you, a example of our cost, fee, and structure, so you can see how it will directly impact us specifically. If we do remain open, it will force us to put more people into our classes, trying to get to that maximum number that you're going to allow. Right now, we keep them between 8 and 10 people. If the new fees are there, we're going to have to push everybody into a class putting 20 people at the maximum in those classes, and that's only going to perpetuate that perception that the parks are turning into a gym, which is what originally was presented to you. And so we want to try to keep those numbers low. Additionally, after repeated attempts to try and explain how our camp works and how we like to move around, Booty Camp likes to stay in one spot, and that's how they do their camp. We do our camp a little bit differently. We like a place to meet, and then some days we like to go take a jog on the running path, or go down to the ocean for a sand workout, or stay in the park and do calisthenics and plyometrics. It's very different. So we want a regular place to meet, and we want to pay the fee to be able to meet there on a regular basis, but we want to be good neighbors. And if a soccer game is going on by a bunch of kids, which happens a lot, and in the spot that they've given us, we just move. We go to the beach. We go for a run. We can move very, very quickly. And so my recommendation is that the number of participants in the classes that you guys are saying is the maximum be actually reduced. It's better for us, and it probably would be better for the neighborhood. So maybe capping it at 15 and keeping the fee where it's at, because if the fee does go up, you're going to put most of us out of business. When we had our meeting with the city at the last meeting, all those camps, we all expressed that, and we all agreed that that's exactly what would happen. So I'm going to leave my comments with you and that structure of how we pay and all the fees. Can I leave that with you?
Thank you.
Oh.
Okay.
Karen.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Karen Munson. I was with you before once before and read a letter from David Barton. David both times that this meeting has met has been out of town, unfortunately. So I'm here to represent our class, a piece of our class. I've been studying with David again for 20 years, and one of the major concerns I have with the lottery system, and that David does and we do, is the fact that our class has met in the same spot in La Mesa Park Saturday mornings for over 10 years, and quite frequently people come back that haven't been around for 2, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. It's very common that occurs. They've moved out of town, they go out of town, they stop doing Tai Chi for a while, and then they show up and come back. And there's not a lot of things I think we can say that I can say that has been consistent in my life enough that I can expect to go to the same place, and practice something that I have for a long time. And it's been really wonderful for everybody. And I'll say in that history of being there, and I have paid particular attention to it since this issue has come up, I'd look around at the park at that time in the morning every Saturday that were there. And, there's hardly anybody there. There really is. And when I think back on the history of our impact on the park, there really hasn't been anything remarkable whatsoever. And I can count on one hand in 10 years when we've had to kind of move out of the way. And that was with dog agility. I think one time somebody was setting up chairs for maybe a wedding or some kind of event, and we totally went way far away from there. An issue was brought up around the grandfathering issue around the permitting process that I heard staff talk about today. And when I read David's letter last time, again, 10 years is a long time, 20 really, but 10 years we're talking about, for rules and things to come about and change, and in that history, and even staff turnover and policy turnover and whatnot. And I believe in the letter that I read, there was David described his history with how he came to be in that space and tried to do the right thing over the years in it. So I guess what I would really love to say to you is that there's something about the continuity of that space that's been really important. And we're hoping that we can find a way to keep it. And I've never seen a booty camp there on Saturdays.
You'll need to wrap up now.
Okay, and so there you have it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any other speakers? With that, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission for comments. And did you?
What are you looking at? I made my comment.
You made all yours. Okay.
So I think Steve was just trying to make me a liar out of me about earlier. So wanted to make sure that he goes out with some strong disagreements.
Little fireworks.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't think any fireworks. But look, I want to thank what's his name? Robert, for this sort of breakdown of costs and what the program charges per participant and so forth. That's definitely helpful for thinking this through. But to step back for a second, I agree very, very strongly with comments from staff that there's for both practical reasons and reasons of principle, it doesn't make sense at all to make a public good, public land, available to private business for free. I'm happy to subsidize private businesses where appropriate for the public good. That's fine. That's part of public policy. But especially in a situation where we're looking at depletion of the general fund, we're looking everyone is scrounging to look for more sources of revenue so that we don't have to cut very basic and fundamental services for the people of Santa Barbara. It just doesn't make sense to me to have any other system than one in which people engaged in private business for profit will have to pay the people of Santa Barbara for use of the people of Santa Barbara's resources, of which parks are a huge part. So I wasn't here in September. Unfortunately, I actually was a little disappointed to see that options 1 and 2 were sort of dismissed in terms of moving forward. I think that if there is a community desire for programs like the ones being provided by the private sector, that it would behoove us as a Parks Department to look into providing it from the public sector. A, because it's expected of us to raise revenue, and B, because it's our job and our purpose and our charter to provide services and provide activities that people actually want to do. I would like to see a situation in which we're partnering with local entrepreneurs who have innovative ideas, following trends in terms of fitness and the kinds of activities that people want to engage in, where we're partnering with them to look at subcontracting situations or even direct provision out of our activities projects. I'd like to see that happen certainly before we're looking into any further subsidy of private business providing the services that we're chartered to provide. So all of that being said, if we are going to move towards the lottery system, and if I certainly think that the fee schedule that's being proposed is more than fair. I'm trying to rack my brain to think of another situation in which an entrepreneur or a business person would be paying that low a rent for that great a real estate as a site to run their business. We were talking about $35 on the outside an hour for some really, really amazing space to be running a business. If you translate that to really any other industry or any other part of the business community, that's a pretty nice deal. And it may be that there will have to be changes to the business model to make it more sustainable from the profit side, but that's frankly not our responsibility. Like I said, I would have liked to see more discussion about the first two options, but given that there's a kind of need to move forward policy-wise, I would congratulate staff on presenting what I think is a pretty common sense way to move forward.
Thank you. The way I understand it, I understand the concerns about Tai Chi, and it's been there a long time. But as I read the staff report, there's really not competition for that spot at that time. Is that what I gathered from the report?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, staff did talk a lot about what the intent of the desire by the Commission for grandfathering was. And as we looked at this, and as the groups that were in shoreline parks, some of them have moved to other sites in the community, and that has worked successfully for them. We had the discussion about if one of the body boot camp type activities wanted to go into that location at that time, we probably, if they had a greater noise level, it wouldn't be appropriate anyway. And so, and I wanted to remind the Commission that this is still proposed as a pilot program. And so, our anticipation is that it won't become a problem for Tai Chi. So if in fact we find that it does, understanding that that is a concern that's been expressed by several commissioners, then, maybe we'll need to relook at what the policy is and could do that. But it was very difficult for us to come up with any criteria that could be applied across the board for grandfathering. Yes.
No.
But it is our expectation that Tai Chi will continue in the location that they are, given that their activity doesn't change. And so, given that, that our recommendation was against establishing any kind of grandfathering.
And I would just like to say thank you for the report, and it was thorough. And to the public, I'd like to say we're not writing these rules for each of your groups. We're writing rules that encompass the entire community and what may come in the future. So if it isn't going to meet your exact needs, it has to meet the general public needs. And times they are changing here in the parkland. But I think this addresses the major issues. It gives staff flexibility to work with different groups through the process. It gives the general public a venue to complain if there are issues, so that we can stay in touch with the issues that arise. We have seen many trends come through the exercise world through Parks and Recreation programming, and we will see many more in the future, and this gives some flexibility to address those. I agree with Commissioner Larimore Hall in the business aspects of it. I think one of the better parts is that you can choose a little bit cheaper site. That is a flexibility built in that I noticed and appreciated is, you don't have to be right on shoreline paying the 25. You can go inland a little bit and pay the 20. So I think you have addressed to the best of anybody's abilities all of the concerns that I had. I appreciate that. I appreciate getting the input from the groups, and then distilling that down to policy that works. So I would be completely supportive of this pilot program. I'd love to hear back in a year about how well it's working, what kind of staff time's involved in it, what the hitches are, and hopefully what all the successes are, because I think that's really where we want to be. So thank you for a very good job is what I would have to say.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
One last comment.
Oh, okay.
Concerning my fellow commissioners' concerns about subsidizing private business, let me just remind them that this is an exercise class. We're not selling merchandise out there, and part of the goal of the Recreation Department is to encourage exercise and outdoor recreation and activities. So if this were something else and we were having a discussion about somebody selling blankets in the park, I'd be all on board with you. But we're talking about how do we encourage people to get out, get away from the TV, get out and exercise for an hour, something that's healthy for them. We just had a long thing about elders and the physical things and the things they were encouraging at the Expo. That's where it breaks down for me as being something different than just a commercial activity, and that's why I mentioned earlier that I didn't think that commercial activity was a way really to properly represent this.
Yeah, I want to say that there's a part of what Commissioner Forcell is saying that I agree with really strongly, which is, and would look forward to more from staff about how to figure out in terms of a fair policy a difference between, yes, 6 people deciding to meet in a park to do some calisthenics and a business. And how in terms of, I like that there's the sort of standard requirements of a business license, of the insurance, et cetera. But there are nonprofit organizations that also work, that also move people into park spaces to do exercise. There are informal gatherings that do it, et cetera. So as we're trying to come up with a policy that's all encompassing, I would in the future, and as we're looking at this policy, like to see for us and also for the public is what are all the options for using park space for organized activity that's not for profit, so that we don't have, although we need a universal policy, as Chair Longstreet said, so that we're not so one size fits all that we're precluding things from happening. That being said, the other thing is where I do disagree with Commissioner Forcell, and I think it's an important point. Obviously, it's a great thing, whether it comes out of the public sector or the private sector, to be encouraging healthy habits and healthy activities. And I don't care in some sense of whether it comes out of the public sector or the private sector. But what I feel like I have a responsibility, and we have a responsibility as a commission to look at, is in every situation and everywhere, everything we're doing, how can we be revenue neutral? How can we generate revenue? How can we help the bottom line? Because I have a feeling that we're going to be moving into a situation where we're going to be making very, very difficult decisions that are going to be detrimental to this city's ability to encourage people to be healthy, to the city's ability to provide opportunities for people to do healthy things, to provide opportunities for activities, etc. So I don't want us to say on the one hand right here, well, okay, we can not be so aggressive in terms of revenue generating now because we want to help a small business, et cetera, and then down the line have to cut our own programming. So I'm just trying in absolutely everything that we look at and everything that comes before us to think very, very aggressively and very creatively about revenue enhancement.
I would look at it much more simply in that, I mean, if I had my way, we'd do everything in the parks for free and they'd all be subsidized and life would be beautiful. But there, I believe it's an ordinance that commercial activities in parks will be charged for, and we are charged with that ordinance. So bottom line is that's the end of that story as far as I'm concerned. And I think this is a fair fee schedule. I think we have to account for the staff time. The other part of this is when you've paid for the spot, it's yours at that time. These are businesses that advertise to come out there and be at that spot. So I'm very comfortable with it. So,
Chair Longstreet and commissioners, it does your comments. I want to pose one additional thing to you. The comment about a nonprofit. The existing rate actually was developed with the intent of covering nonprofits. We frequently in our facilities have a different rate for nonprofits. And so I would pose to you that if you would like to have us incorporate that perhaps the nonprofit rate would be the current rate that exists already, and that the higher rates are that applies to commercial businesses. So we could go in that direction fairly easily, since that was really the intent. You know, it was infrequently used, and it was generally a nonprofit that had that type of use in a city park. So. And the other thing that I would say is, you know, we're heading into the development of fees and fee policy for FY10, so it could also be something that we revisit in the future.
Thank you.
I do have a comment, Chair Longstreet and Commissioners. I just want to clarify something that Nancy said. When we, probably about 4 years ago, when we looked at fees for these multi-session classes or activities, we actually did build in a fee for a social group that was meeting not on where maybe fees were dues were part of the club, but it was not a commercial enterprise. And so we do have that fee structure in place. I believe the fee is $12 per hour for city residents and $14 for non-city residents. This was the only fee that we were considering to increase for for-profit commercial activities.
Were there any other comments, or are we ready for a motion on this report? This is for action. We need to take action to adopt. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Commission, it is providing direction to staff in the mid-year of an existing budget. The Parks and Recreation Director has the authority to introduce a new fee for a new activity. The policy is being determined by the Commission, and so, yes, you would be providing that policy direction to staff, and then we would implement.
So I would, let me see if I can take a stab at crafting a motion. So I would move that to concur with the recommendations of staff for fee schedule and policy regarding commercial activities in city parks and beaches, with the proviso that with the addendum that the currently existing fee schedule would apply to nonprofit organizations, and that we would the Commission would like a report on the status of the new policies in 6 months.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone who participated in this. Keep us informed. All right, this brings us to our advisory committee interviews and appointments for action. I believe all of our applicants are incumbents today, which means we will have no interviews, but we will just have votes. And I do believe we do not have any extra. We're just filling space.
I move that we appoint all of the incumbents who have applied for open advisory committee positions listed in the agenda.
Good.
I'm just checking to make sure they're all reappointments.
Yeah.
They all are, aren't they, Carla? Okay, then I second that motion.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Well, that brings us to the end of our agenda. I would like to wish everyone...
Oh, go ahead.
Everyone a happy
I
holiday.
could call for adjournment when the time came.
Oh, okay. Everybody a happy holiday season.
I would move for adjournment, Madam Chair.
Second.
I don't know. Maybe I won't adjourn today because you're leaving, Steve. All those in favor?